Hey guys, welcome to the Adventure Photo Show. My name is Steve Reichert, and I'm an outdoor photographer and filmmaker specializing in adventure, I guess. And this is a nice little casual photography live stream. And I haven't had a chance to do one of these live streams, like the Sunday night live streams, in a while, but I'm excited to have a chance to hang out with you guys, talk a little bit about cameras, storytelling, photography, video, and really all with the goal of helping you find ways to go out, tell your story, and enjoy that process of working with a camera. Because to me, photography really is something that should be fun, and same thing I think with the filmmaking that I like to do. And it's good to be with you guys here on this Sunday night and to have a chance to be back in the studio. You may notice that it's a little bit different than the last time I was here. I kind of reconfigured some things, moved some stuff around. And my idea was to just kind of have a little bit more space to work with, and also having hung up some of prints that I got made over the last couple of weeks. Wanted to be able to put those up somewhere and then have them kind of fit into the studio environment here that I'm working with. And also, of course, I'm back in my studio because I'm back in New York State now. And as most of you watching, I would imagine, if you're a regular on this channel and on these live streams, you probably know that I'm in nursing school right now because I made the decision about 6 months ago to bail on being a professional photographer. And now, of course, the career change is a 3-year process minimum till I can really get the ball rolling with nursing. And so I am actually staying with my dad as I prepare to start the spring semester of my pre-nursing courses. And actually, these next couple weeks are going to be really critical because I have some big tests that are going to determine if I get into the nursing program in the fall, or if I'm going to have to spend like another semester doing prerequisites and have to kind of kick that can down the road. So this is kind of got a lot going on here. But today I bid farewell to my family, and they left. So we got to spend a little bit of time together out here, and it was really nice having that time. But now, I gotta turn my attention to kind of really getting back in the groove and kicking things off for the new year. So I'm curious to hear what you guys have going on, any questions that you may have, things that you are working on. But I'll give you a little bit of outline where I am. Oh, good evening, King Yuzi. Glad to see you here. Joining in from across the pond, Craig Hawkins. Going well, sir. Good to see you here as well. I have 2 videos that are dropping this week. One of them tomorrow is going to be my nighttime photography review of the Fuji X E3. I took it out on a photo shoot, got some images that I was really stoked on, and I'm going to share those images with you, as well as probably more information than anybody really cares about in terms of how the Fuji X E3 works in terms of night photography in the cold, because I was shooting in like 20-degree weather for a couple of hours, and I've touched on some of that stuff over the last couple of weeks, and excited to get that out, because after that video is out, I really only have one more video remaining, and you can all breathe a collective sigh of relief about this. I know I am. One Fuji X E3 specific video remaining. I don't really have anything else to kind of cover on that camera besides the video function. So I want to do a video about the video and kind of test out the 4K, the autofocus, and try to just see how it shoots from a video standpoint. Honestly, more from my own curiosity than anything else, because I don't think there are too many people who are able to access the internet and read the specifications and know anything. Granted, I'm able to read, and I access the internet, and I know a little bit about Fuji specs, and I still got one of their cameras as a video camera, and I live to regret that. But I'm just kind of curious to see what this little camera can do from the video side of things, and especially with the XH1, the new kind of like the upgraded XT2 camera that Fuji's going to have coming out. I'm kind of curious to see, just to test whatever iterations of their cameras I have access to from a video standpoint, because I'm secretly rooting for Fuji. Well, I guess not so secretly, but I say secretly because I've gotten some criticism because some of my reviews are too critical, and so you know, to me, I feel like the more critical you can be in a review, the more helpful you are to a prospective buyer, and possibly the more irritating you are to somebody who's already bought the camera and just wants to be, massaged into feeling good about the money that they spent. But my perspective is less about, making other people feel good that they bought the camera, and more about saying, hey, if you're thinking about this camera, here's something that you need to be able to live with, right? But all that notwithstanding, I've always been kind of critical of any camera that I use because, hell, cameras are expensive and I expect a lot out of them, and some of that's realistic, some of that is not realistic. Certainly, it's just kind of me being a little nitpicky. Good evening, Daniel. Good to see you here. Um, and yeah, so like I'm always kind of nitpicking, but at the same time I'm still rooting for Fuji. I love the Fuji system. I think they're great cameras, and my criticism of the cameras is only because they mean enough to me that I really bother to own them and look for the flaws and share those flaws with other people, not so that people will avoid buying them, but so that other people can enhance and enjoy their experience more going in with their eyes open, because everything that you do, every decision is always a trade-off. You can't get, have your cake and eat it too. But anyways, curious to do that. And then once I get kind of finished with the XE3 review stuff and I kind of finish with that technical stuff, really I'm going to be turning my attention more towards actual storytelling projects that I am working on, because I need to kind of zero in my focus, and I have some loose ends there that I definitely need to put more time into, rather than just kind of talking about cameras and specs and stuff like that, but actually turn my attention to using the camera to really tell these stories that I've already shot and got in the bag. And on Thursday, I am really, really excited, and Craig, I saw your question there. I'm going to get to that in a second. I'm really, really excited about the fact that I'm finally going to be able to release the Wind River project, which is a climbing video project that I spearheaded and started in 2013. The idea came to me while I was flying across the country that I should get a bunch of other type 1 diabetic climbers together, and we should go and try to establish a new route in the wilderness in Wyoming in the Wind River Range, and do something kind of obscure and out there. And the story is, well, you'll see that on Thursday, and finally that's gonna, because it's gone through the film, it's gone through the film festivals and all of that stuff, and so now it's going out to it's going out into the public, and I'm really excited to be able to finally share that with you guys, because I know a lot of what brings folks here, I would dare say a lot of why you guys, signed on and kind of subscribed, for a lot of people anyways, is, photography from more of a technical side of things, or discussions of cameras. At least that's how we tend to find each other on here, because, search terms being what they are. But what I really look at as the most fulfilling stuff that I do, that I think has the most value, is actually the stories that I tell, or that I try to tell, which is always a struggle for me. But anyways, Craig, your question about the photo lens for lifestyle photos, I mean, the answer is, unsurprisingly, that it depends. It depends on what sort of lifestyle photos that you want to do, and also the way that you want to capture stuff. For me personally, I think that the 23 and the 35 honestly are really, really, really hard to beat, because the 23 is wide enough that you can shoot wide stuff, and in many cases, worst case scenario, you can even shoot multiple images and do a little bit of stitching if you're shooting some sort of a landscape thing and you need something that's a little bit more panoramic. And the 35, you can back up decently if you're operating in an area where you have a little bit of space and you're not contained a great deal by within a room or some sort of area confined. The 35 allows you to capture a decent amount of environment in there if you back up a little bit, but then if you get a little closer, of course, the 35 really renders out some beautiful, beautiful portraits. Both of them are tiny, both of them are relatively inexpensive. They give you a lot of variety, and they are both weather sealed and tack sharp, beautiful lenses. So to my mind, I would have to flip a coin and say somewhere between the 35 and the 23, but a lot of that ultimately you could, somebody could cook up a completely different answer based on the way that they like to shoot or the environment in which they like to shoot. And so, if you're going to be doing stuff that's more indoors or there's going to be more containment involved, then yeah, certainly going to a wider lens like the 18 or the 16 could be really, even the 14 could be beneficial. But for me, I think the way I like to shoot, 23 or 35 is kind of the way to go. So yeah, that's always it's always tough to answer specific questions, and good evening, Bo. Good to hear from you. Good to hear that you're going to be buying the XT2. I'm a little bit jealous. It's pretty sweet. And Bro Audio, thank you. Thank you for the feedback there on my reviewing strategy. It's sometimes it makes me a little bit crazy when I do reviews of cameras and I talk about cameras and people are like, oh, well, if you have this many complaints and why do you even have it? Like, as though liking a camera means that you shouldn't be able to criticize it. And it's like, no, I criticize this stuff because I care enough about it to actually invest critical time and thought into it so that I can share something with other people. The one difference, I guess, would be maybe with the XT2 as a video camera. The XT2, I was a little bit disappointed, although on some level I think it was, I didn't realize exactly, I didn't. I don't want to say that I didn't do the research because I knew what the technical specifications were for the XT2, and on paper the XT2 looks like a fantastic video camera, and on a tripod even, when you have like the battery grip and or you plug the camera in and you're able to overcome some of its major flaws, it does operate really well, but I did not really recognize the impact that just kind of the way the camera operated and the way that it handled from a video side. I didn't really take that into full consideration, and so but the only way to really figure that out is by actually getting a camera and figuring it out, I think. There's only so much. I read very critically everything that was on paper, and I still chose to buy the camera because it was like, yeah, that should be okay, like I can work around that. So, and that's part of the reason why I was really kind of went in a little bit harder after the XT2 and kind of was a little more critical with some of the stuff, especially on the video side, is because I feel like unless you hear somebody else say, yeah, it's a good camera and the specs are good and it does these things really well, but when it comes to actually using the camera, how it handles for this stuff is problematic. Then you can easily be deceived into buying a camera, and I don't say deceived as in like Fuji's trying to pull nothing against Fuji, but just like not really understanding it. Bo says, I don't like shooting video stills is what interests me. I agree with you about video drawbacks, but lots of firmware updates. Very true. The firmware updates have made a big difference, especially in the autofocus on the XT2. And I think they added some things, like they added the histogram on screen when you're shooting. They added a few other things in there as well, but like not having IBIS and the physical layout of the camera, and then also trying to switch back and forth from stills to video was something that was always really problematic for me because I wanted to use the XT2 as like my one camera to shoot stills and video. And you wanted to shoot something with a 1/500th of a second shutter speed, or maybe 1,000th of a second for your still image, and then for video, let's say this is just a hypothetical situation, but there's a difference in the shutter speeds, and you were always having to kind of change multiple things every time you went back and forth from one to the other. And one of the things that really and my purpose in saying all this stuff is not to even really get into a whole Panasonic Micro Four Thirds versus Fuji discussion, but one of the things I loved about the Lumix cameras, they have the ability to where you can have presets that contain or capture all of the settings for the specific mode that you're shooting in. So if you're shooting in video mode, you can go from shooting 4K, 60p, 1/120th of a second shutter speed, or 1 2/40th or whatever it is. No, yeah, 1/125th, I guess is what it would be. Double shutter speed, right? You can go from shooting that to then, just one move, one turn of that wheel, and you can be in photo mode, and you're at like 1/1500th of a second, or with a different ISO and different, and you have all that stuff, and it just swaps straight across. So you're just like, oh, I'm shooting video, click, boom, I push the button and I go. Not, oh, I want to shoot video, let me change 5 different settings, and if I get any one of them wrong, my video is going to be worthless. And then meanwhile the action happens, and especially for stuff, again, the way I was shooting, very much like on the go, unscripted stuff, where it's like I got to be fairly covert, got to be very quick, and got to kind of not have the most, setting up a tripod and like asking people to walk through again. It's like, you're traveling in other countries and, doing adventure stuff. You have to be able to kind of pick up and go. And so for me, the GH5 and the Lumix cameras, I think, can use you to echo your sentiment a little bit there. The Lumix cameras have really, really hit a sweet spot there for my money, that I can't find anything that, like, there's nothing even with any of the cameras that I've seen that would make me, even with all of my susceptibility to gear acquisition syndrome, that makes me even, turn my head even a little bit towards some of these other cameras, because, I know how well it operates and how well it handles and how usable the camera is, especially for video and for photo and for the style of video, and how well that it works. It's starting to get broken in like a, like a shoe or a baseball glove or something. I don't know what kind of analogy you want to use for that, but the handling of a camera makes so much difference, and that's the one thing that I'm always kind of harping on, because I feel like it's hard to buy a camera that has bad technical specs these days, but you can find a lot of cameras that aren't necessarily laid out as intuitively. And I actually had Tim, I don't know if Tim is watching this right now, but one of my friends here, the audience here on the channel, Tim, he's like, yeah, I'm shooting with the OMD 10, EM10 Mark II, which is actually a camera I was thinking about getting just for granted, just because I wanted to try it out, because I haven't ever shot with any Olympus cameras. Oh, Matt, I'm sorry. Where did I get Tim from? Maybe it said Tim on the box. Maybe I thought it said Tim on the box. Maybe there's somebody else named Tim that I've been calling Matt all this time. I apologize. Anyways, yeah, thank you very much for sending me this camera, and I absolutely will. I cleaned it up a little bit already, and I'm gonna send it back in as good or better condition than I got it. And super cool, because like I do a lot of stuff on eBay, and you kind of get used to having people be very skeptical and back and forth and like kind of testing and like, oh, you're not gonna rip me off, but that's Matt shot me a message on Twitter and was like, hey, yeah, I shoot with the the Olympus EM10 Mark II. I'm curious to hear your thoughts about it. And I was like, man, I really wanted to get that, and I was thinking about that right around the time that I got the XE3 instead. And I always get questions about the Olympus cameras, and so I'm gonna test this out a little bit and play with it, and I'm gonna do a casual comparison against the XE3, which is about kind of like, they're not too different in size, and I know that just from a technical specification standpoint, there's some stuff that the Fuji has, like 4K or whatnot, that the Olympus doesn't have. So my goal isn't to really do a comparison to say this one is better. With like what I do with most of my reviews, it's usually more practical. But I'm curious to see, because I know how much less this, the Olympus camera costs than a brand new XE3. And honestly, my initial impressions, and I'm not going to go too far down this rabbit hole because I don't want to get ahead of myself, but playing with this thing a little bit, just initially, and I changed some of the settings, so I apologize in advance, but like, turned off the sound and just kind of got it set up basically equivalent to the way that the Fuji is set up, so that I know kind of where my buttons are and what I want to do with this. The menu system is the biggest challenge. Like, the handling on this is very challenging just because it's so completely different. That it's so completely different from what I'm used to shooting the Fuji camera, so that's been like a big stumbling block for me. But when I kind of take that out of the mix and just look at how this camera does what it does, man, like I'm really impressed for the money. Like especially like with, and I didn't even realize when I started using it that that it had the touch screen on it. And I have to say this, and like I know, well, since this is a live stream, it's probably not going to get to play, and it's we're 20 minutes and change in, so I figure that this probably isn't going to be heard around the world as much, figuratively speaking. But um, you know, the touch screen on this Olympus is like the way that the touch screen responds to like movement is, I think, at least as good, if not better. And I want to say like it feels a little better, like it's smoother and a little bit less buggy than the touch screen on the Fuji, which I guess I'm not super surprised. Yeah, and for $299, I mean, man, and I still have to actually get some shooting done with it. But like even with the in-body image stabilization, I was using the IBIS, just kind of shuffling it back and forth while I was holding the camera, and you can see a huge difference. Really impressive. The layout feels hateful and unfamiliar to me, and the menu system feels like extravagant and extensive, and I'm just like lost in there. But there's a certain amount of that is just my adaptation or lack thereof. But I am very favorably impressed with this camera so far. And I'm kind of looking forward to doing, just playing with the video on that too, because that's one of the things that seems really nice is I think it has 120 frames per second on it too, and I have to dig through the specs a little bit and kind of get a better idea there too. Andrew Cap asked if I have tried shooting film before. I'm assuming you mean still like film photography. I have done some film photography. I actually have a handful of film cameras. I've always the thing that's been the stumbling block for me with film has usually been the cost of development, because it's just expensive to get that stuff developed, and at this point the time and the space, really more than anything, the time and space that go into developing film are things that I don't really have. I'm getting ready to start my second semester of pre-nursing, taking nursing school entrance exams, plus I'm teaching a full load, and commuting to see my family and doing these videos and also trying to stay sane. And like this semester, like last semester, I completely was sedentary. Like I was just a load. I sat and did work constantly. That's all I did all semester, and I can't do that again for another semester. Like I need to get out active. I need to be good at managing my time is really what it boils down to. But anyways, those are just my excuses. Love shooting film. Absolutely love it. I find it very relaxing. But I'm still not good enough at it to the point where I'm always really impressed when I see somebody make a nice picture with film, just because I feel like that's kind of out of my pay grade, I guess you could say. So I like shooting film in theory more than I do in practice, but that's definitely something that I want to do more of. Anyways, Matt, yeah, about the Olympus, and I always forget the EM10 Mark II. Yeah, that I got to figure out the settings for it and everything as well. But I think once I get get the spend some time with it and get everything dialed in, I think that will help a little bit for me. But I think one of the things at the same time, when you look at value for money, you say you pay $299 for this camera, and even for a slow lens, like I felt like the 20mm Lumix lens, 1.7 lens, it's not super slow, like that's a pretty good lens. It wasn't bad, like especially, and that's the thing, if you pay $299 for a camera when it's a hair slower than a camera that you pay $1,000 for, you feel like you actually are happier with the camera that goes a little slower because you just saved $700, and you're getting, you're missing the performance mark of the $1,000 camera by that much, and it's like, hey, who got the better deal here? Because more often than not, like, that's not going to be the determining factor between a good shot and one that's not, because more of good shots has to do with preparation and positioning and stuff. So, but the thing that I always come back to is like the Fuji cameras with the external aperture on the lenses, the aperture control, and the shutter speed control externally, like not having to, digitally adjust those things, but being able to, it's just a very different perspective that the people that designed these cameras have from each other, because this is very much like a digital, more technological perspective, where it's like, we want to make this about, you're operating the digital camera, whereas the Fuji, it's much more about, like, we want to kind of go more towards an analog experience where we're making it as simple as possible and removing as much complexity as possible, which, again, that, different strokes for different folks. But if I'm actually really excited to do this, because when I was looking into the Olympus, I was looking into EM10, the Mark 1 actually, and then I was looking into the 2 and the 3 and just kind of looking at those. And I don't know if Queen of San Joaquin, if you're on here tonight, but she usually stops by my live streams on Fridays anyways. And she was looking to get a camera, and I was highly recommending, based on just what I was looking at these, because, I think a lot of times people get into the idea that, a more expensive camera is going to be better. And certainly many of us, guilty, have credit card balances that reflect this. And that's another thing that I'm doing this new year. My new hobby is like paying off debts and getting control of my finances, because what I have modeled for everybody here with my gear acquisition syndrome has not been responsible. Just being realistic, and I've gotten in my own way in terms of being able to move forward with my life and with my family by just making stupid decisions and impulsive buying of stuff, and part of that, coming to terms with that and changing that happened around the whole idea of like, okay, it's not okay for me to buy a $1,600 camera and $1,000 worth of lenses on credit, because I'm not going to stay with professional photography anymore. And it's like, that helped me make the break that got me selling, getting rid of stuff, and reframing my perspective and saying, okay, I'll find a camera that gets me where I can go, but I'm going to do it at a price that I can afford. And all that to say that the Olympus cameras, for $299, I mean, that is a hell of a lot of camera. I mean, that's really, and that was my impression before I even actually got that camera from you. And so, yeah, I'm probably going to pick it apart, especially if I compare it to the Fuji, and there's going to be some nitpicking and like, oh, this, that, and the other thing. But like, if somebody said, hey, like, I don't have much money, what's a good camera to start off with? Like, that's the Olympus camera, that's really, really, really good value, I think, compared to what a lot of other cameras offer, Ed, good to see you here. Scott's Wild Camper. Eddie says, been working 15-hour shifts every day for the last 18 days. I haven't uploaded anything in the last 18 days. I haven't uploaded much, so Happy New Year to you, and I appreciate that. Eddie, that's very, very much appreciated, and I have been kind of off the wagon in terms of my, because I've had a lot of free time, and I've had free time with my family, and so when I have free time with my family, I'm like, oh yeah, like because I shot a bunch of stuff before the new year, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to be out of studio, so I'm going to shoot like a handful of videos. I'm going to go to Massachusetts. I'm going to hang out with them, and then that way I can just edit everything and release it, and that way it stays nice and smooth, and there's not like a drop-off of content. Then I was like, oh, I'll do that tomorrow, and then it's like, oh, let's watch Netflix. Yeah, okay, let's watch Netflix. Oh, go sledding with my daughter. Yeah, I'm going to do that. And of course, I have no regrets, but now that I'm in a situation, my family is Massachusetts, I'm back in New York, and like I have nothing to do here but work, and I have a lot of motivation to like, really manage my time well. I'm excited to, get back in the groove and making more videos and stuff. And honestly, one thing that I have been really feeling a lot lately, and I don't know, I'm trying to sort this out. I haven't like reached a conclusion where I'm saying, here's my new thing, what I'm going to do, but I want to find a way to do more with my videos. And when I say do more, I mean physically, like actually go and do more things. So over the last several years, couple years really, since I gave up traveling, living on the road, and kind of went into that place, and some of you guys have followed the channel for a while, kind of my story with the trailer and like living on the road and like adventure climbing and vlogging. That was like my thing. And I was kind of trying to find my stride. I didn't really hit my stride until I started talking about cameras, and that's where it was like things started to click, and I started to develop a little bit more of a style and a format and an audience for that matter, which is always nice, at least here on YouTube. And that's been something that's been really positive. Like, I've been really thankful for that. I've said many times, nobody deserves an audience, me least of all. And it's, I'm flattered and honored that I have you guys that will spend your time here with me. But at the same time, there's also a part of me where I feel like I'm neglecting something that I could be bringing to you guys and to the world at large, and also to myself. That is more valuable than some of the stuff that I know people will watch. I will watch. I spend time watching camera reviews of cameras that I'm never going to buy just because it's kind of fun. But I want my filmmaking and my photography to actually take me places and be part of things that I'm doing. Because to me, from a philosophical standpoint, if what you're shooting doesn't mean anything to you, and what you're doing and what you're sharing with other people, if that's not something that truly has value, then all of the rhetoric about super valuable, actionable content that's going to help you, change your life in 5 easy steps and be a millionaire, and your morning routine and the apps that you use to declutter your mind and crap like that, I have no interest in doing that, or that's just not my interest. And I don't want to kind of go down the path of trying to chase a bigger audience and miss out on doing things that actually have some value. So that's something that, especially in these winter months, I have a little bit of time to kind of sort some things out. And like I mentioned earlier, definitely need to kind of play catch up. And there's a handful of projects that I need to finish editing and just stop being lazy and stop doing like easy, non-production intensive camera reviews where I can just sit down and talk and cut up a little bit of footage over top of it. That's always easy to do, and I'm like, I just want to have something where I can just edit it and put it out there, because I want to feed the algorithm. I want to keep people interested and excited about the stuff that I'm doing, but at the same time, I keep kicking the can down the road of actually doing meaningful stuff where I have to put in more effort, because I don't want to like lose the ability to kind of keep putting stuff out there and grow the channel, and so it's kind of a catch-22. Because frankly, there's always that discussion between quality and quantity, and it's like, well, if you put out really high quality stuff and you put out one thing a month, people will subscribe and people will be stoked. But there's that fear that it's like, okay, if I put something out once a month and it's a flop, that's kind of that's a little bit more committing, and I see that happen sometimes, where there's like one of the videos, that little documentary project that I'm working on, like about type 1 diabetes and the cost of insulin, the Banting's Ghost, that documentary project. I put my first episode of that out, which I worked on for a long time. Like that was hard. I put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into that, and I think right now it has like 300 views. I say, oh, I'm going to talk about why, the autofocus on the Fuji whatever camera is great or is terrible, and I'll get 300 views in an hour. And and it's really hard to be honest and say, okay, I'm going to not care, or I'm going to choose to focus elsewhere and if like only 300 people see this, that's going to have to be good enough. And to be fair, I know that sounds a little bit like, maybe a little whiny, because for many people, 300 people seeing their work would be a big step up, and so that's something to be thankful for. But those are some of the things that I'm thinking about and that I want to do, because there's always that. I always feel like there's that risk between, you know, the stuff that has searchability on here versus the stuff that is really more near and dear to my heart, which is more like, hey, you know, like since I kind of got off the road and I changed my lifestyle and then have gone back to school here in New York, you know, I'm not living in the mountains. And there is still climbing in New York State, but I haven't been climbing, haven't been backpacking, you know, a lot of those things that are a little bit more, that, you know, you have to really be ready to get after it when you're doing that kind of stuff. I just don't have the time or the mental energy to be like that psyched about doing something that's that difficult, honestly, because I have to apply that aggression and like intent to my schoolwork, which is equally as unpleasant and risky, maybe in different ways. But for me, that's been, you know, that's taken a lot of the, you know, the precedent or the top billing in my life has been that harder stuff, in the schoolwork, rather than doing it physically with the climbing. And so I've been getting back interested into fishing again and getting like fly fishing and fly tying and all that stuff. Oh, King Uzi with the zinger. That is, yeah, you're 100% right. I'm missing the three C's: cats, cleavage, and clickbait. Um, yeah, I think about that sometimes, and I see. I guess I don't think about it that much currently. Like I've kind of gotten over the fact that I've accepted it. It's like, okay, you know, I hear people talking about, oh, this small channel with only 50,000 subscribers, and I'm like, man, like if somebody unsubscribes from my channel, I'm like, who was that? Who unsubscribed from my channel? Like jerk. Like what did it, you know, like because they didn't like what I said about the camera and they thought that, you know, blah blah blah, you know, this person unsubscribed. I knew they were gonna, you know, it's like I notice like every person that comes and goes, which is kind of a nice thing, I guess, on some level too. And I don't, you know, my goal is not to be Casey Neistat or anything like that, obviously. But yeah, it's like I've started to kind of get a bite on the audience growth and like reaching more people and doing more stuff. But then I think about it as like, is it really worth it to reach more people when I'm, you know, if the best that I can bring people like 90% of the year is camera reviews or discussions about things that most people already have some concept of, you know. Um, and yeah, Eddie, you actually are one of the people who I thought of and who inspires me a lot, because like the stuff that you do and just going out and, um, you know, going out and recording your adventures and sharing them, that's something that means, you know, definitely means a lot. And so I'll be honest, like I'm thinking about starting a new channel because one of the things I realized after I pivoted this channel back in the day, you know, pivoting is just not a good idea. And I want to be able to keep things simple and to say, like, okay, this is a channel where I do this and I wear this hat. This is a channel where I wear this hat, you know. And that's kind of the way that I want to handle that stuff, I think. And I'm not sure that I'm still debating whether or not I'm going to do that. That's something that's kind of in the works. And maybe the answer is just to kind of let my hobbies be my hobbies and keep them separate, you know, where it's like I don't necessarily have to do a YouTube channel that has anything to do with whatever particular activity that really has, you know, captured my attention at the moment. And I just kind of do one channel and really try to make valuable content. But the problem and the question is always like, really, what constitutes valuable? You know, is valuable content something that, well, there's room for more camera reviews. I mean, I can review a camera and somebody will watch it. You know, there are people who will watch it, but does that mean that it's valuable? And that's the part that I'm a little bit, yeah, you know, I'm not 100% convinced of the right answer, you know. Matt says, I did that, have a few channels. As my main one grew, people started to have expectations. I made others for my own freedom to post other interests. And that's kind of what I feel like right now. It's because, like, my daughter is 3.5. Like, she's really psyched on fly fishing. Now, when I was, like, 10 years old, I started fly fishing, and I started tying my own flies, which is really nerdy and esoteric for a lot of people. But I was a weird kid. I was a ham radio operator, and I knew Morse code. I'm still licensed. I have a ham radio right there behind the camera. Um, I do all these things that are kind of. I've always been a little bit odd in some ways. The things that I like to do, and also like music, like playing the guitar, and then climbing and fitness stuff too. Those are all kind of different, disparate interests that I have, and it's hard to really make inroads on a channel on YouTube without kind of putting on blinders and saying I am the guy that talks about Fuji cameras, period, without really being able to bring in other parts of your life. And so that's kind of the thing where I want to be able to say, okay, I'm going to go, do a day, and I certainly could do this, but I want to, like, maybe go fly fishing for a day, and bring a camera, shoot it, and be like, this is kind of what I shot, kind of like what I did with the X100F the one day that I went climbing with Martin, and instead of making a video, it was just kind of like bumpers on either side, either end, and then the middle was really just telling a story with photos. And I kind of like that. Like, I like doing that, and I want to have the freedom, I guess, to find a way to bring that creative element into other things that I'm doing, whether that means going different places with the content on this channel, or whether that means starting a different channel to really bring more context for other people. And, like, the funny thing is, like, I spent half an hour watching with my daughter, and she's like, most of the time it's like she wants to watch Peppa Pig or Paw Patrol and like all these execrable, cartoons that I just loathe. And I was like, look, you want to, watch a fly tying video on YouTube? Because I was kind of thinking about it. I was like, I wonder if they have any fly tying on YouTube. And I was like, I can just imagine how boring that would be, like a close-up shot of a fish hook and a person's hands while they're talking and winding thread and feathers around a hook. And that's exactly what, like, 90% of it is. And she, like, watched it for like 45 minutes. Like, she was just like way into it. And I was thinking, once I started watching it, it was like, yeah, I kind of like that. So anyways, I don't know exactly where I'm going with that. I'm just kind of thinking out loud, I guess you could say, a little bit, and sharing some of the direction that I've had, because to a large extent photography for me kind of replaced, like, I discovered photography along with climbing. It was like when I started climbing and I started doing road trips back in like 2007, 2008, it was like, well, I'm going to these places, why don't I bring a camera along and learn how to use it? And then it was like, okay, I'm climbing hard on, for 3 days, I need a rest day, I'm going to go out and spend a day shooting. And then that kind of it kind of led me to that next step of kind of getting more into photography. And then, once I got off the road, I stopped traveling, and just very recently, kind of my life kind of hit some bumps, like, pretty close together. It was like, lost the job that I had, and then lost the trailer, and then kind of wound up back on the East Coast, no climbing, and with my mother-in-law and all that stuff. It, like, and nothing against the East Coast or living with one's mother-in-law. Like, if it wasn't for that opportunity that I've been afforded, like, I would, my family and I would be completely screwed. But it is kind of depressing. It was not kind of depressing, incredibly depressing to be like 34 at the time and like fail publicly at something that you're trying to do, living on the road in a trailer, and then looking back at it and being like, that was a terrible idea. Like, that was a good idea, but it was really poorly implemented and executed. And I don't know what I was thinking, and to kind of have all that going through your mind, and on top of it, you're in a place where you can't do the one thing that really helped you kind of work out your issues, which for me has always been climbing. And so I really shifted entirely into photography as like the main thing. And now I'm kind of shifting back out of that to say, like, yeah, photography is still always something that I want to bring with me, but I want to bring it with me into something other than just like photography for the sake of photography. I want it to be like sharing the next thing that I'm going to do, because for me, fishing is where it all started when I was a little kid. It was the first way that I found to connect to adventure, to connect to exploration and the outdoors. And it's like, that's such a huge and such an important thing that is missing these days, like from everybody, you know, even in my own life as an adult who values that stuff. I look at how easily that those benefits of being outside and exploring and adventuring, I look at how easily those things slip away, even though I have, for the majority of my adult life, shaped my existence around where I can climb and how far I am away from people and places that I can climb. That's been my focus, and yet it's still slipped, uh, like sand through a sieve type of thing, and I see what a hole that has left in my existence, and I like feel some sympathy, I guess, for a lot of people who don't even know what they're missing. And so and also with, at the same time, kind of being a little bit, reminiscent of my childhood and nostalgic about the way that I grew up, and having my daughter come out to visit me here at my dad's. And it's like, and seeing her get excited about the things that helped me build bridges into the outdoors, figuratively, and like just wanting to be able to give other people that excitement. And with climbing, that's been fun for me. But, it's really hard to shoot good climbing stuff, being honest. Like, this photo, I'm really happy with this, but this was hiking. This isn't climbing. This is hiking after the climbing. When we're actually on the climb, there's like 3 or 4 shots that you can tell where we're climbing, and half of them are butt shots that don't even look, would never get printed in a climbing magazine, let's just say. But the climbing is really fun for me to do, but then people look at it and either they say, it's not that big of a deal, or they say, oh, that's way too crazy, I could never do that. But with fishing, it's like, fishing is something that anybody can do. I mean, you could be, there are places you can fish even if you're almost, disabled and stuff too, and it's therapeutic. And sorry, I've been kind of ranting here, ignoring some comments, so I'm going to go back a little bit. King Uzi says niche stuff can get popular fast if it's shared in the community, and I believe that. My question is just which community, and so it's like, are we talking about community of like outdoors people, or are we talking about community of photography? Because I'm not even 100% sure that I've really made a mark. Well, I shouldn't say that. I think I have made a little bit of a mark in the photography. Like, I've gone on Reddit a few times, and I've had people be like, oh yeah, like I recognize, I've watched some of your videos, and I'm like, oh my goodness, like I don't know whether to hide under a rock or like, fall over with embarrassment or all this stuff. It's kind of, it's very flattering at the same time too, but yeah, it's just stuff that this is all part of the process, working through it, and I appreciate you guys talking about this with me. Eddie says, personal integrity is a thing I'm just needing to think about. I could get a much bigger audience by doing outdoor gear reviews and more outdoor cooking videos. Not really what I want to do. Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, do you want to put the structure in there so that you're doing a rinse and repeat type of thing? Or do you want to do something that's a little bit more organic, and that, and I guess what a lot of it comes down to is like, is it about you or is it about your audience? Because like, if it were about me, I could live my life very happily without ever doing another camera review. But I know that it does, and it's worth it. I'm not saying that it's like, oh, I do this because people, goad me into it, or I feel obligated, because like I have, strangely enough, and I would have never thought that it actually mattered like this, but I've had people send me emails and be like, hey, thank you so much, like you saved me a lot of money, or you kept me from making a decision, or you helped me make a decision that really was beneficial, just by, something that I thought was just really inconsequential, which was just, a camera review. But at the end of the day, when I'm saying, okay, I'm going to get this camera, I'm going to do this, this, and this to review it, it's more for the sake of like, yeah, this is something that I think other people will find valuable. Whereas when I'm like, I'm going climbing, I'm going to bring my camera along and take pictures. This is like, yeah, I hope people like this, but if they don't, I'm still going to do it because this is what I want to do. And I think there's a balance there too between those two perspectives that um, I think that everybody has to find. You know, King Yuzi says filming in a cinematic way would do well, as a lot of the niche stuff is old video or GoPro stuff. That is very true, and that is something I've really thought about. Like in terms of a new channel, what I would if I were to do this as a new channel, what I would actually want to do is bring a little bit more production value to like fishing stuff and try to make a variety of different things that have to do with fishing and creating, both sides of it. Like have some pieces that are instructional and do like, try to do a 2 video a week format and then pre-record and edit and everything and have everything all batched out for a month's worth of content, at least maybe 2 months worth of content before ever launching the channel, and then launch it with enough headroom there and pre-created content so that I could really build it from the outset. But try to do everything where there's a balance between cinematic stuff and then also all the rest. So And Eddie, thank you. I appreciate that you think I was a cool kid. I think, honestly, my childhood, I had an amazing childhood. So, I mean, we live in a house with 2 bedrooms. There were 6 of us living here. This room that I'm in right now, this is the bedroom. My brothers were in here. They had a bunk bed, and they were in here for most of my childhood before they got older and went off to school and what have you. There's 6 of us living in this tiny little house, and we were always I always wore hand-me-downs and everything was on sale on a rack. Not like I don't look at it as being poor, because I had my mom and dad. My mom didn't work for most of my childhood so that she could spend time being kind of a stay-at-home mom and really and she also taught me at home. I was homeschooled for several years too, because my mom was professionally a teacher before she kind of fell out of that out of love with the system, I guess you could say, and started teaching us herself. And I had an awesome childhood. And a lot of kids, I would look at other kids and they all had newer clothes, they all had the nice sneakers, they all had the Shaq pump up shoes, when that was like a thing, the pumps. That was like a status symbol growing up. Like everybody, if you could afford the Shaq shoes that had the pumps on, you were like, you were all set. Or video games, if you had Super Nintendo, you were happening. You were well off. I never had any of that stuff. We didn't have TV. So I would just it was like, oh, you're bored, go outside. Like, you want to do something? Well, why don't you take up fly fishing? It's like, oh, you want to talk to your friend on the phone? Get a ham radio and learn Morse code, which ironically, that whole thing initially happened because my parents were like, oh, you got to save on the phone bill. I was like, okay, fine. So I went into ham radio and then spent, worked for a whole summer to save up money and bought like $1,000 radio. And then, my friend and I would still talk on the phone about our radios. Hey, Tiff, good to see you here. I was hoping you would make it on tonight. Good evening. So yeah, that's a little bit memory lane about my childhood there, Eddie. Matt says, you are an engaging speaker. Share things that you're truly passionate about. That's good advice. That's what people respond to, is realness. And I think you're right about that. It's the thing is, the hard part is on my end for me to say that's the thing that I'm going to do with conviction, because it's really hard. Like when you don't have an audience, and I found this more often than not, like when you don't have an audience or you don't have anything to be careful of, it's really easy to say, I'm going to do this thing, I'm just going to go in this direction. And then after a while, it's like you start going in this direction, you're just like, whatever, nobody cares anyways, it's just me. And then people start looking, people start watching, and then it gets a lot harder because it's, you don't want to let people down or whatever, and you feel like if people start to lose interest, you take it as a reflection of something. I mean, and I think that there are successful people in quotation marks there. I think successful people manage to block that stuff out or find a balance of it where, you know, they don't believe their own press and they stay true to the stuff that they're doing. King Uzi said that you need a drone for climbing. I would say that, like, yeah, to really get really nice cinematic shots and beautiful shots that put perspective in everything, the drones are just outstanding. The problem is that drones completely ruin the experience for everybody, and they're just the most annoying thing. And like, I'm an enthusiast who understands the value of drones and filmmaking and all that other stuff. And when I'm climbing and somebody has a drone, my first reaction is like, damn it, why didn't I bring my shotgun? Like, come on, fly that thing over here. I will blow it out of the sky. I just hate them. I hate them. It's so irritating. And I figure that if, as somebody who understands and who has considered buying a drone and doing that myself, if I feel that little kindness towards drones, I can only imagine that other people who would be less inclined, even more so, to to overlook that impact on their time. So yeah, they're both 100% necessary and just also completely not viable, which is a bummer, because like I get the appeal and they really make a huge difference, but they also just piss everyone off. They're really loud, they're really obnoxious, Tiff. They're really loud, really obnoxious, and it's like, you know, climbing is the type of thing where maybe yoga could be a close, or like working out like at a gym, where if you were at a gym and somebody's standing next to you like vlogging while you're trying to do squats, and like, you know, maybe they're like across from you and like their camera is like, they're talking to their camera, but like their camera's shooting you over their shoulder, and you don't, you know, it makes you a little uncomfortable and it's kind of invasive, and you just feel like, you know, what the hell, like, just like, I came here to just be alone and like do my thing, you know. And with climbing even more so, because climbing, there really is a component of risk involved there, and effort that goes into it that is very, you know, so much of climbing is mental. And I think really every pursuit that people do, you know, I think most people just don't realize that, but I think that goes for everything. But like, there's a huge mental component with climbing that's more obvious because of the fear and the psychological control that you're trying to maintain. And when somebody, you know, zips in with a drone and you hear a drone, I mean, you can hear them from quite a distance away, and it's just really distracting at best. Very, very distracting. And that can be really irritating. And then plus, everybody's like, you know, who's this jerk? You know, that's kind of the thing. So shooting climbing is really challenging in that standpoint. If you have a couple of people with cameras who are really psyched, and you know, you can get people to move around, you can get some really great shots that way. And in answer, I forget, I think it was Ralph who asked this question. Sorry, I have to go scroll back in the chat. Yes, Ralph asked, yeah, this is a shot I took with the X100F, and my climbing partner Martin. You know, we always have a lot of fun when we go out shooting, because he's as geeky as I am with the cameras, and he's always like stopping to shoot everything and like telling me, oh, go over here, oh, this, you know, and like, so we'll be scoping everything out, and like, we'll try to call shots before the other person. So it's like, when I see like a nice shot, it's like, I'd be like, oh, Martin, go over there, before he tells me, oh, Stephen, go over there, because, you know, he wants to get that shot or whatever, you know. And so we always have a lot of fun going back and forth like that. But having that second person who's willing to do that work and who doesn't feel like it's work, that makes a big impact there with that kind of shooting, because it's really hard to substitute, even with, you know, with the drone. Yeah, I'm just reading back through the comments there. Yeah, King Uzi, the silent, transparent drones, that will be really nice. I think that quieter drones, Tiff, like you're saying, less intrusive distance. Like, I think there's definitely hope. You know, I think there's definitely hope for that stuff, but I think that the drone footage is it's a challenge. You know, it's a challenge that can be overcome with enough technical effort, even. Um, and actually, Tiff, you'll be happy to know that. Well, so some of you guys are Patreon supporters, so you've already at least had the opportunity to see the Wind River project, but that's going to be released. I'm going to release that on the YouTube channel here this week on Thursday, so I'm kind of excited for that. Speaking of climbing videos, but there's definitely, yeah, King Uzi says camera plus helium balloon equals great success. I think there's, yeah, that you can get really creative with that stuff. I guess the problem, or maybe not well, yeah, it's a problem. It's an obstacle with shooting climbing stuff, is that it's really hard to shoot casually when you're shooting climbing stuff. Like, you have to really go out of your way, and it's usually going out of your way in a way that impacts the other people, where the other people have to be somewhat invested in what you're doing. It's not like, oh, I'm just going to tag along and shoot. It's like, oh, you're trying to climb this project. Okay, well, I'm going to have to run ahead. I'm going to hang my rope. And, you know, a lot of times if you're in really good shape and you're very motivated, you can do that stuff without it being, you know, without it getting in anybody else's way. But, you know, like if you're talking about a bigger route, something that's grander and more spectacular, it's like, okay, we're going to have, you know, we're going to climb this section of rock like a handful of times, because, you know, one person is going to climb it to put a rope up there, and then the camera person is going to go up, and then they're going to secure themselves at the top, and then everybody else is going to go back down a rope length, and then they're going to reclimb it a second or third time or whatever, so that the, you know, the camera guy can get the shots. And sometimes it's possible for, you know, the camera person to go around independently, and when that works, that's great. But a lot of times, you know, it requires a certain element of, you know, invasiveness that is, it's the price you pay for getting the shot that you want, ultimately. And so that's a price I've been paying for, or, you know, trying to pay, and in some cases, probably not paying that price nearly as much, because more often than not, when I'm put to it, I'm like, you know, if I can get some good shots, I'm going to get some good shots, but I ultimately want to have a good, safe, fun day climbing. That's like, you know, my goal is the experience that is being had, because ultimately, you know, I think there's, and I know it sounds kind of, well, it may be a cop-out, and it may be idealistic, it may be an idealistic cop-out, but the way I look at it is that the best things you can give other people are authentic experiences that you're giving them, rather than, you know, higher quality cinematic footage that is not really representative or authentic of what you actually experienced. And not to say that there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying that that's kind of the way that I've always worked, and that's led to a lot of the decisions. Oh, King Uzi, the selfie sticks. I did one video with a selfie stick. I did, and you know, it was interesting. It gave some useful perspectives, but I wanted to kick my own ass after I, you know, was doing, like, I couldn't. I don't know how to explain it, and it's not even like a peer pressure. Like, it was me and my partner, like, all alone on this ridge in Zion National Park that gets climbed, like, maybe, you know, 10 or 15 times a year. So not a thing where it's like, oh, what are people thinking of me? It was just like, it. Part of the thing too is it's really distracting to be thinking about, like, shooting video, because with stills it's just like you take the shot and then it's over and you put it away, whereas with video it's like, oh, I'm going to keep the camera out, keep it running, and like, oh, I got to move around this, and like, it's so much more involved that there's an extent to which the stills have a huge advantage, I think, in climbing than video does, because there really is no way for people to make a video of climbing that is both aesthetically really high quality and not invasive, and, you know, that causes a lot of intervention on their experience. I don't think there's a way to do that, and if there is, it's I haven't come across it. At least not with, like, technical rock climbing. Perhaps with mountaineering, stuff that's just like, you know, really steep hiking, yeah, that stuff, and like, you know, but when it comes to like technical rock climbing, when you're on the up and down, Um, oh yeah, yeah. There, you're right, Tiff. Tiff says I'm sure there are enough climbers with sponsors who purposely set out climbs to shoot footage with a drone. So taking photos is still more unique. Well, I agree, and I appreciate that perspective, and that's my own as well. And that was something that, like, back when I had a prayer at getting sponsored, um, and I was never really on a fast track. I was always kind of off the mark for really being a sponsored climber. But when I was really training and putting more into the physical component of it, then there was always like, okay, so if I'm just spending my time training and I can't go out, and I can't spend the time making videos, and what am I going to have to give to sponsors to say, hey, I'm worth this to you? Because, like, there are plenty of people that can climb hard, but if you're not able to, show stuff for, media is what ultimately really what sponsors are paying for. It's like they're not out there holding your hand while you're climbing and saying, oh, high-fiving you at the top. They just want the picture of you on a really hard climb, because that's what allows them to sell their shoes and their clothes and their jackets and stuff. So that was always a struggle too before I got into the, do I do a channel about fishing, or do I do a channel about cameras, or do I do just a channel about, taking my camera fishing and just do it in one channel? Before that, it was, do I spend my time training and climbing my face off, or do I spend my time, setting up shots so that I can get in, like, 15 minutes of climbing footage that are decent quality, but I miss out on the rest, a lot of the other real harder climbing through the day, because I'm really out there getting footage more than I am out there actually climbing. And, like, that was always my original. I've always been kind of faced with these weird dichotomies that are so frustrating. Well, Tiff, you will get, I promise you that you will get your wish, and it will be very random. You may get more than you bargained for in the random fishing video department, because that's like, because right now I live in an area of the country in upstate New York that is world famous. Like, when fly fishing came to America from, like, England and Germany in the, like, 1600s or whatever, upstate New York was, okay, maybe I might have my timeline wrong about that, but it's world class. Like, it's world renowned fly fishing, on par with, like, Alaska and Montana is, like, the Catskills in New York, and that's, like, right in my backyard. And since, I have some climbing in my backyard that's actually really good here too. But it's the style of climbing isn't like big open stuff like this that lends itself to, these grand scenic shots. It's not as aesthetic from a scenic standpoint, because, like, a lot of times with climbing you can get away with taking shots that aren't really that great because of the fact that oh, hey, Mike, you are from Mount Vernon. I know where that is. That's a little bit I want to say that's a little bit northeast of where I am, actually. I'm just down by Newburgh. But yeah, with climbing, a lot of times you can get away with a shot that's, good, not great, but it looks better because, everything is so grand and spectacular in the background that it's just like, oh, wow, that's impressive. But then when you're in an area that looks a little bit less, austere, you put that same kind of shot in front of somebody, and they're just, they won't even register. So with fishing, so you have to work harder and be more. And really, what it comes down to is, like, photography requires you to be, or my opinion of photography, anyways, and filmmaking largely, is that it requires you to be in it. You have to be involved. You have to be able, and you also have to be mobile in order to participate and move with the action and move ahead of the action. And with climbing, your mobility is severely impinged, because really the only movement that's happening is the climber, and you're always relegated to being static almost all the time. I mean, there are some times of the day, like, there are certain scenes, like when you're coiling up the rope at the beginning or the end, or you're, like, unracking gear, or you're, like, at the belay, or, like, eating a meal when you're sleeping on the portaledge, and I've done some of that in some of my other climbing videos. Like, there are those moments where you can get in there and you can get those nice little detail shots, but a lot of times there's a very limited amount of opportunity for action, and if you're not positioned just right, like you just kind of miss it, and then there's a huge amount of effort that got expended for that one opportunity that was just like a very short amount, and it's like if you miss it, and it's just like, you know. So yeah, oh boy, got some great comments here and questions. Eddie asks if I've ever ice climbed. Yes, I have ice climbed. It is different, very different from ice climbing, and I'm not very good at it. Not, in other words, rock climbing is something where I would, you know, call somebody up, say, hey, let's go rock climbing. They're like, oh, I've never really climbed before. And I'm like, look, I'll show you how to hold the rope. I'll show you how to do the stuff. I can, you know, I'll teach you, because I guide rock climbing as well. That's one of the things I do occupationally. I mean, it's really, yeah, it's not meant to be a full-time career, but it's kind of filling in some of the gaps for me. So I feel totally comfortable with that. With ice climbing, it's like I'm the person who's like, I want to go ice climbing. Let me call Rob and ask him if he wants to take me ice climbing. That type of thing, because it's a whole different ball of wax. Just, you know, ice is very different from rock. Tiff says, I miss fishing. I did it frequently with my grandparents when I was younger here in the Midwest, Illinois and Wisconsin. Wisconsin's got good fishing, actually. Illinois may too, but I know less about Illinois fishing. But since the end of high school, yeah, it's very few and infrequent. And that's almost exactly my scenario, too. It's like I've only really started getting back into fishing, number one, because my daughter, and, you know, she's really stoked on fishing now. And also because I'm back here living where I grew up. I'm living in my dad's place while I'm going to school, and I don't have the time to travel to go climbing, so it's like, well, you know, what can I do in the area that's around me? So, and also one of my childhood friends, my best friend actually growing up, he lives, you know, close to here, and so we started getting together and talking, and we're like, yeah, we should go fishing again. So that's kind of been building some of that, like rediscovering childhood memories and like going out and getting back into that stuff. So I'm all about, you know, kind of taking a second lap around as an adult and, you know, getting back into it. King Uzi asked if Martin's dad did any photography while climbing. I am so glad you asked. And I don't know whether that's a softball question that you put out there because you wanted to give me an opportunity to talk about something that maybe made more sense or something that you were more interested in. But in any case, yes, Martin's dad is an amazing photographer, and I guess filmmaker, because he actually shot with film video cameras. And I shot like a whole thing this is one of the projects that I have to edit. It's like a little mini doc, but it's going to be two halves, two little films. One is Martin's dad talking about like photography and filmmaking as a climber back in the day, because he started climbing in like the 40s or whatever, because he grew up in Switzerland and he came over to Canada and started working as a ski instructor in the Canadian Rockies, and he wound up becoming head of Parks Canada. But he also had a very good eye photographically speaking, and so I have one video that's just about kind of shooting a little bit with him, and like he and I and Martin and Martin's mom, we went out for a drive along the, I don't know the name of the highway that goes like through Banff, in Alberta there. Might even be the Trans-Canada Highway or something. I could be wrong about that, but it goes right through all the scenic stuff like Peyto Lake and Banff National Park, and well, I think Peyto is in Banff, but there's like Kootenay, Banff, and then there's like Columbia Ice Fields and Jasper, or maybe I got that in the wrong order, but there's like all these like parks are kind of stacked up next to each other, and we were just driving around with him, and like he was shooting and talking about photography and what he experienced over the years. And like the day before that, he took us down to the basement where he has like all of his old gear, and it's like going into a museum. You know, he has all his old film cameras and video cameras and all that stuff, and so it was really cool, like a perspective on the creative element of adventure media with his dad, who's now like almost 90 years old. And then the next day, me and Martin went and we climbed. So like his dad put up a climbing route when he was a ranger there at the Columbia Ice Fields. He put up a route, and then he, you know, hadn't climbed it for like 35 years or something. And, you know, we just happened to be talking about it because he showed me a picture that he took, or that somebody took of him. His partner took a picture of him back in like the 60s when he was climbing this route that he did in the Columbia ice fields. And he was, you know, was on the cover of like the Canadian Alpine Journal or something. And I looked at it and I was like, oh, like, I wonder what that's like. Does anybody still climb that today? Is that, you know, and he's like, oh, no, nobody's climbed that in a long time. I was like, well, how far away is that? And like Martin and I were looking for something to do. I was like, well, why don't we go and see if we can find the old pitons and see if we can, you know, find your way, the way that you went up there. So we went up there all together, and like, you know, Martin's dad hiked with us. And actually, no, I don't have pictures of it back here on the wall, but obviously I got a lot of, well, one of the prints that I did from that I showed in one of the live streams that I did recently. It was a print of Martin and his dad. His dad like did this, like the approach was like this, and like his dad is almost 90 years old and he still does stuff like this. Like he doesn't do like when you put on the ropes and have to go straight up. He doesn't choose to do that anymore, but like he does some incredibly burly stuff, and so he did the approach to the start of the roped up bit of climbing, which honestly, like as somebody who's young, relatively, you know, healthy and strong and good at climbing in the mountains and feeling decently comfortable, I was pretty sketched out because like half the stuff was loose, and he was just, you know, he was ahead of both of us. You know, he's got his like hiking poles and he's just moseying along, and like because this is, you know, he's did this like, you know, hundreds of times or whatever, but for me, I'm like, this is the first time I'm in there and I'm, you know, crapping my britches. But being able, you know, go with him to the start of the route, and then he kind of points us in the right direction, and like the clips that are at the end of my all of my vlogs, those are from like the, with Martin and his dad and his mom, and we're like at the car scoping out the route, and he's kind of pointing out where it goes. And then we went up there together, and Martin and I, you know, roped up and we climbed the route, and then hiked back down in the evening, and then, you know, met afterwards. And it was really cool, and it was also horrifying and scary. And I got hit in the head with a rock the size of a softball. And if I hadn't been wearing a helmet, I wouldn't be here making this video. Put a hole in my helmet. Big sharp piece of limestone that came down pretty fast. But anyways, that notwithstanding, that was pretty exciting, and I think I'm missing some questions here somewhere too. Eddie says, I was out camping with two fishermen friends, and they had some beeping sensor thingy on their rods. I asked if it was a high-def fishing rod. Yeah, I don't know too much about like all the technical stuff with fishing. To me, like, I'm from a fishing standpoint, my interest is less in the acquisition of fish and more in the experience. Like, for me, fishing is something that I'm very, you know, how like some people are like, oh, I don't use, you know, I won't edit my photos because it's wrong, or like it's, you know, dishonest or something. Like, there are not many things that I'm that way about, but like with fishing, that's one thing where I'm very much like, okay, if I'm going to catch fish, I'm going to catch this type of fish, and this is how I'm going to catch them, and that's it. Like, I'm not interested in like the other stuff most of the time. My standards have declined a little bit, you know, as I've aged with fishing stuff. But, you know, what I really like the most with fishing, I like fly fishing. I like making my own flies, because there's something really satisfying about taking a bear hook, putting some bits of thread and feathers and fur onto that thing, and take this thing that you made that's an imitation of something that exists in nature. And it's pretty clever that you can actually do this stuff with the materials that are used in fly fishing and fly tying. Like, and you can take this thing and you can go out there and then you can fool a fish. Like, it's pretty cool. Like, the whole process is really satisfying, and that's the thing that I like. And then, of course, you know, if it's a smart fish like a trout, then it's even better, because, like, you know, you really hit your stride. Like, you had to line up your ducks in a row to make that happen. You know, it's a pretty accomplishment. It's a pretty decent accomplishment. Yeah, I've heard there's good fly fishing in Scotland actually. Speaking of Scotland, one of my 3 T-shirts that I own. Um, yeah, I need to. Scotland is a place that Scotland has a lot of the things that I like to do over there. Honestly, a lot of good stuff. And actually, fly fishing as a art, as a craft, really developed over there between Scotland, Ireland, and England. And I'm sure there are, people have probably fought and died over who really, were the ones who, innovated and led the whole fly fishing movement, whether it was England or Ireland or Scotland. I don't know that much, but I need to get back into it. And a lot of times too, for me, like I just need to shift gears. Like if I get too into one thing for a while, I'm like, okay, I kind of got where I wanted to get with it. Now I'm going to go somewhere else. I'm going to do something else. And I'm not saying I'm going to do that. I'm just like, it's just an idea that I'm kicking around. I hope you guys understand that. And I'm 100% open to, hearing ideas and comments about any of that stuff because, um, yes. Tiff, if you ever get a chance to go fly fishing, or if you ever find yourself in New York, by all means, let me know. I would uh, really love to. I would love to be able to introduce you to fishing. And maybe, hey, if it starts out with at least just being able to make a video where I kind of, show some of that stuff, maybe that would have to do in the meantime. And that would kind of help me scratch that creative itch to do something that's a little bit, not just camera reviews. So that would be kind of neat. Because I think that, yeah, it's one of those things that a lot of times maybe I didn't realize that seems to be a little support for the idea, at least theoretically, the concept of fishing here. And I think a lot of times it helps people go out and start pursuing something when they, it's at least nowadays with technology the way it is, everybody starts by going on YouTube and like saying, okay, like that's how I got into, whatever. I mean, that's how I got into Fuji cameras, and now here I am, and like, all I talk about is cameras. And it's because, I was like, I want to buy a camera. And it started with Fro knows photo, because I was like really into Nikon, and I was looking for information about the Nikon D600, which is the camera that I was shooting, and I wanted to, and that's how I stumbled across Fro and Ken, the angry photographer, like ranting about just one of his ranting videos, and I was like, what is wrong with this guy, and how come he never posts any pictures of his work? But yeah, that's kind of how I got into that stuff, and it's all because you watch somebody else that's already there, and then you start doing it yourself. And Tiff says, I find when more YouTubers do what they love in all aspects of life on their channel, they incorporate their creative side and ability to do that brings it out even more. Yeah, I think that's true, and I think that that's very true. One of the things though that just makes it, I always feel a little bit like I get anxiety and I feel unease at the idea that somebody is going to find my video because they're looking for information on, let's just say, fishing, but they're not going to subscribe to my channel because it's a camera channel, and they get put off by that. And it's like, I feel like I need to have things organized where it's like, okay, if I'm going to make a video that's about fishing, or if I'm going to videos, not like one offhand video, but if I'm going to start making more videos where I'm doing more things that are adventurous, where it's kind of like it's like how much of a pivot constitutes a new channel worthy pivot versus just saying, yeah, it's kind of in the same vein. I'm going to just kind of, shift over a little here, but it's not really a pivot. You know, that's always the question that I had, because I like keeping things organized, and I think some of this is OCD, and some of that OCD I think comes from like storing photographs and being like, okay, backups of backups, and having these, and then these are the ones that I'm editing, and these are the ones that are just kind of cold that I'm not really doing anything with. But if something ever happens to the hot backups that I'm editing off of, then I can go and and you kind of get into that mindset, that habit of looking at things that way. And so you want to have a very clear taxonomy of like how everything is structured. And especially, I mean, to a large extent on YouTube, and I think that this goes along with what you're saying about YouTubers who do what they do because they're passionate about it. When they're passionate about something, there's usually that thread that connects it. And then there are individuals like myself that are just really passionate about a bunch of different things at a bunch of different times. And I don't think I'm ADD. Like, I don't lack focus. To me, it all makes sense. It's all part of one thing. But helping that, it takes a lot of connecting the dots, I think, to make it make sense to other people. Maybe not. Maybe I'm overthinking, because I always overthink things too much. Sometimes that works. And then other times it's just terrible. I got a new CGM the other day, so now I can check. I'm bionic again, and I can check my blood sugar. 74 is what that says. New CGM, pretty stoked on that. And King Yuzi, you said before you've always wanted to fish. Again, like, I would love to find a way to, I would love to find a way to get you fishing, because like fishing is like climbing in a very like they seem like very disparate activities, but in a lot of ways they put you in a very similar headspace where you're just like, I guess what it is they put you in a flow state, that where you're just, there's no external thought process. You're just doing this thing that's kind of repetitive and meditative, and that's out in nature, and that has some practical component to it that's valuable. In climbing, it's transportation and fitness, and with fishing, it's more entomology perhaps as a benefit, and also fishing, actually catching fish. So there's like just super good way to spend time, honestly. King Yuzi says, I cooked a salmon for Christmas. My dad turned up with a 2-foot beast and said, here, cook this. It still had scales and everything, and scales went everywhere. Yeah, scales on fish I have done, and that's one of the reasons why I typically throw my fish back. It's because it's just like, I'm like, do I really want to put in the effort to skinning this thing and like scaling it? And more often than not, the answer is no. And so I'm just like, yeah, that's all right. I catch and release, and it's like makes me, I can, and it gives me the progressive card, so I can play the progressive card about how like I'm, contributing to sustainable fisheries by not harvesting fish out of there. But the whole practice of stocking fish that's a whole nother ball of wax too. Mike says, how can we do multiple things on one channel? I also overthink things, and I think I think a lot of it really has to do with how you perceive it. And I think that ultimately, as much as like I enjoy talking about this, speculating and kind of getting your opinions and input, ultimately, whatever I believe in the most, to the point where I'm willing to say, this is what I'm going to do, and this is why, because this makes sense to me, this is my vision. If you're executing that vision, it doesn't necessarily have to make sense to anybody, but what people follow is people follow your vision. So it's like, if you're not certain of why you're doing it or how you're doing it, then that's going to show, and other people are likewise going to be like, yeah, what are you doing there? But if you're certain of what you're doing, and this is some good advice that I'm giving myself, so thank you, self. This is really actually useful, and I hope it's useful to you guys too. But like, if you are certain about what you're doing and you're doing it confidently, even if people don't necessarily understand it, they will respond to the confidence and the passion with which you're executing this off the wall conglomeration of weird things that don't really externally make sense, but that somehow come together in your channel and create this weird flavor of, like, I mean, whoever thought about putting like cream cheese on salmon? Like, what the hell kind of an idea is that? But hey, it's actually pretty good, I mean, there's a lot of people that like that, myself included, right? Or like putting butter in coffee. Although butter in coffee is a little closer because it's dairy and that's normal. Milk and coffee is normal-ish, right? But like these are things that have to come from somewhere. But ultimately, I think it boils down to having conviction. That's the position that I'm taking. I just have to really work out for myself what my position is and how I want to do this, or if I want to do this, and like prioritize things. Because the other part of things too is like I really want to make sure that I'm prioritizing stuff and not just kind of trying to do everything, because trying to do everything means being pretty good at nothing, generally speaking, at least in my experience. Andrew Criswell says, technical question, converting Fuji camera to monochrome, do you give up a lot in post by not adjusting color channels? That's a good question. There are probably people that would have different takes on this. Generally speaking, when I am converting to monochrome, I don't just convert to monochrome with the one click. Usually what I do is I try to get the light more or less the way that I like it, and I usually do an edit in color first, and then when I do put it to black and white, what I do is I go, I use one of the film simulations, usually Acros, or Acros with the red filter sometimes. I like the way that looks. And I'll just kind of play around with those, and then I'll kind of go from there. But I don't do a whole lot with adjusting colors, honestly. Like, the only time I adjust colors is if the colors look off. And sometimes I shot a video that's going to drop on Tuesday where I was shooting night photos of long exposure night photos of a waterfall that was like half frozen. Oh, changing the sensor to monochrome. So you mean like in camera monochrome? Is that what you're saying? Because so I shoot raw, and again I just enjoy shooting raw because I enjoy editing the photos, and so it will import them into Lightroom. Depending on how you import them, it will import the raw with your JPEG settings already pre-adjusted into the raw image in Lightroom, but you can reset that and go to so it doesn't like remove the color info from the raw image anyways. So physically changing the camera, removing the color filter. Well, that's way above my pay grade, sir. I have to say I have not done that or attempted to do anything remotely near that. Yeah, because the only Fuji camera that I currently have is pretty new, and I'm a little bit dubious about doing anything that could jeopardize its physical function. And I am not the guy, like, just this picture here that I just framed, I shouldn't tell you guys this because now, you're going to actually be able to notice it, because I bet you couldn't tell that I completely messed up the framing on this thing because I cut the picture the wrong way, because I can't cut in a straight line, apparently. And so I had to, hey, Queen of San Joaquin, good to see you here. Just 1 second, I want to mention something to you, Queen, that I thought of you earlier with. Anyways, I cut way too much off the bottom, and I had to use a strip of black gaffer's tape, which, if I hadn't pointed it out to you, if the light doesn't hit it just right, you can't really see it, and it was better than having like a gaping space at the bottom, or like having to buy a new frame or whatever. But yeah, I am not the guy that has any business doing mechanical stuff on the inside of a camera. But that's a very interesting question. I think that your question would probably, Angry Photographer, he's a good nuts and bolts guy. I bet he would have an answer. For you that I definitely can't give you. So, Queen of San Joaquin, good to see you here. I was hoping you would pop in. I was speaking of you earlier. One of our fellow cohorts here, Matt, sent me this Olympus OMD EM. I'm not used to the alphabet soup here, the Olympus flavored alphabet soup yet, so it's going to take me a little bit. I'm still like getting over the XT2 and the XE3. So the Olympus EM10 Mark II, which I believe is one of the cameras that I was trying to convince you to look at like a couple of months ago. Hey, Peter, good to see you here too. So I mentioned this camera to you. He actually sent me his camera to just kind of play with and, you know, give some feedback and review it a little bit and see what I thought. And I'm actually going to do like a proper video of that at some point in the next few weeks. So I just wanted to let you know, because I thought if you're still interested, you're still looking for a camera. So far, what I have, you know, my general impressions of this camera just from the outset is like, it's a lot of value for money. It's really, really sweet little camera. And Matt said that he got this for around $300, which for $300, like video and stills, like I am impressed with everything that they put in here. I wish, I don't love the menu and the layout, like the ergonomic. Well, the ergonomics actually I love, but just like the buttons and the menu stuff, it's a little like, I don't love it. It feels a little like early 2000s type of thing. It feels very digital. But the stuff that this camera can do and the way it operates, and I've just been blown away. So hoping if you're still, and I'm assuming you haven't gotten a camera yet. If you have, great. And if you have not, then hey, that might be interesting to you. Anyways, let's see here. Good deal. Okay, so you're going to be getting a camera in February. That will be good. Yeah, the around $300 is what they're going for. So yeah, very cool. Oh, so Angry Photographer was the guy who recommended taking off the color filter. Yeah, I don't know anything about that. He's got a lot of interesting ideas, and I say interesting like sort of tongue in cheek. You know, yeah. For me, I'm not, and I know that there are some people who are like some photographers that like their shtick is, you know, kind of they want to see how everything works and take it apart and, you know, get in there. That's never been my thing. I'm like, if I have a camera that I can get to work and I go out and shoot with it, which again, there's some people that are like engineers and technicians more so than photographers. And I think that, you know, from what I have, just from the preponderance of work that Ken puts out, it seems that he's more of a angry photographic technician or photographic engineer than maybe a photographer, strictly speaking. But that, I mean, that's only based on what I've seen from his work. So yeah, sorry, I wish I had a better answer, but I would love it if you let me know what your experience is with that. If you actually succeed in doing that and you go through with it, let me know, because I'd be interested to know how, you know, if it helps, if it's better or worse, and also if it's you know, how easy it is to pull that off, to see if, you know, it's a good move. Yeah, good to see you here, Peter. It's good to see all the regulars in here tonight, and even meet a couple of new folks as well. Peter, you've never used Olympus, but they always look good. Reminds you of the G7, G5, G85 ergonomics. Yeah, it's interesting. It's kind of like the ergonomics feel like they're like Fuji, but they're a little bit, because like the Lumix, the G7, G85, they're a little bit on the boxy side. And this is kind of shaped a little bit more squarely, but not necessarily boxy. So it's kind of in between. Like it feels vintage-ish in some of the layout. Well, it's interesting, Peter, that you like the dual dials, because like the dual dials make me feel like it's a Lumix camera, and I just want to like I want my Fuji dials. I want my bloody, you know, aperture ring on the lens, and I want my shutter speed over here, and that's it. Like I just want Yeah, but that, a lot of that is just me. You know, that's not a reflection on the camera as much as it is just like this is what I'm used to shooting. And honestly, like the menu system is kind of, you know, yeah, Olympus looks like the budget Fuji's, eh? That's and the other thing too is like the Fuji's don't have like the mode dial. Um, so yeah, like the Fuji's are just really simple, and I like that. The simplicity of it. But ergonomically, actually, it's kind of funny. Like the EM10 Mark II, I think I got that right. Ergonomically, feels very similar to like the XE3 with the 27. Feels very similar in a lot of ways to the EM10 Mark II. And Queen, the Olympus, there's tons of lens options. It's a micro four thirds system, so there are a lot of different lenses you can get for that, as well as adapting vintage lenses, which I've done some videos about that, and I may even do another if I want to stretch my camera review style videos into the XE3 even further. I may do one more on that camera specifically about using with vintage glass. And actually, when I do the video about the EM10 Mark II, I will mention go into a little bit of detail about the lenses, because I think that's one of the huge advantages of the Micro Four Thirds system. I mean, and technically the Fuji system as well, is that you can use manual focus lenses with adapters of like a $20 $30 lens. Like the Minolta lenses are beautiful lenses. Um, and yeah, like Peter said, you can use the Panasonic, any micro on them. And Olympus makes really good lenses too, and they're tiny. At least the ones that I've used, like a handful, like they're little 25 and 45 millimeter lens is what they had. So yeah, I think for $500, and you guys in the chat could correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the 20 millimeter f1.7, which is actually the very lens that Matt sent me to use on this, you could probably get that, because like that lens I want to say goes for around $140 to $170, somewhere in that neighborhood, depending on the condition. And the camera is probably going to be about 300, and you might want a little bit extra accessories for some sort of a carrying system, and like a blower kit, something to memory card, stuff like that. So when you kind of throw in all of that stuff, you're probably talking right around $500 for exact this exact kit right here. So that, I think that's actually very fortuitous that Matt sent me this to review at this time, and it really is a nice solid kit for the money. Yeah, Andrew, that's funny you say that, because like those are the two Minolta lenses that I have as well, and I had no idea that they were so good. The Minolta, the 28 and the 45. Oh man, I was blown away. I think that I like them better without the speed booster. I think I like them better with just like the dummy adapter, because the speed booster causes like some. At least I use the cheapo speed boosters, which work well enough for video, because you don't really see, or at least I can't see the distortion in the video as much, because the pixel peeping is a little bit less extreme. But on stills, when I'm looking at the stuff that I'm shooting through the that additional glass of the speed booster, it kind of messes with it. But like I was using those, the 45 especially, I was using that on the X Pro 1, and the X Pro 1 is like kind of clunky, relatively speaking. Like the screen isn't that sharp, like you can't really see to do manual focus nearly as well as you can on focus peaking. But on the XE3, using some of those old lenses is just a joy. It's just amazing. I love shooting that. But of course, then now, back to school and no time to go play around with the cameras. Um, so there's that. But somebody just said something, and I wanted to respond to it, and I missed it. Oh, um, LX100. Interesting. Yeah, Peter says to look at the LX100 in the Panasonic. In Panasonic, I think that's interesting. I don't know much about the LX100. I looked at that at one point, but I wound up not going that way. Went with RX 100 Mark V. And it's funny, I think that Olympus cameras, at least from what I have heard and from what I know, I think that they are underrated by a decent amount, just because like I don't know what it is. Yeah, I can't really put my finger on exactly why it is that it seems that way. But I always, like, even when I first heard about Olympus, I was kind of like, somebody's like, oh, why didn't you look at Olympus? And I was like, oh, that's Olympus. Like, I remember Olympus being like kind of crappy old point and shoots from like the 90s and the late 80s. That was the only real memory I had of Olympus. So it kind of, didn't really stick. But then the more, since I've actually looked into them more, it's, you know, I've been pretty impressed. And, honestly, the whole Micro Four Thirds system, whether it is Olympus or Panasonic, like, they just do really, really good. They do really good stuff, I feel like. And a lot of people look down on them because of the sensor size, but I think the smaller sensor enables them to do some better stuff. And to a certain extent, like, you have to pair it with faster glass when you have a smaller sensor, so it's like some of that stuff kind of washes out. And a lot of people like to hate on, at least in the Fuji world, I know a lot of people hate on the Micro Four Thirds stuff, but it has its place. And honestly, like, I've printed off the GH5, and like the GH5 shots that I've printed are just outstanding. Oh, we haven't talked about the GH5S. So here's the thing. I have zero interest whatsoever in ever getting rid of the GH5, and so I'm finding it really difficult to be motivated to think about the GH5S, especially because the 5S doesn't have IBIS. And to me, like, I feel like whatever video quality that you might gain through whatever thing, and I apologize for being completely unprepared for that question about the GH5S or the G9, whatever other things that could be gained from the image quality that they would put in without the IBIS, because like even the GH5 with all of it, that's what it is. I think it's just low, so it's supposed to be better in low light, I believe. It's supposed to gain 1 or 2 stops, if I'm not mistaken, of low light, but you sacrifice the IBIS. So it has no high-res anamorphic, which that's a cool thing, but I can't and don't use that. And the IBIS is like, that's the one thing where I've had, when people ask me anything about video, it's like, get a camera with IBIS, because the in-body image stabilization makes such a big difference in your ability to make video that is a lot more forgiving, especially if you have any intention of doing any kind of handheld video. And with all the rest of the different settings and modes that they have in the video, I mean, half of it I don't use. Like, I don't really need cinematic 4K video all the time. I mean, it's nice, and I don't even have memory cards that will accommodate the 400 megabyte per second or 450 megabyte per second video. Like, I just, I can't even shoot. So like the GH5 is already above my pay grade, so I don't know that there's much room for me to get too excited about that, especially when they took away the IBIS. That's kind of like, I don't know if I can handle that. I'm curious about the Fuji X-H1, not because I want to get it, even if it is the one camera, because Peter, before you got here, I was actually saying that one of my things that I'm now interested in, I am making getting out of debt my new hobby, and like making money and kind of getting my financial house in order. So any more new cameras for a long time, that's going to be out of the question, and I mean it this time. Unlike the last 3 times that I said that. Let's see. So Peter says that from what I've seen, the GH5S at ISO 12800 looks like XT2, so not really low light, but good for micro Four Thirds. Okay, so yeah, that would be interesting. That would be interesting to see. That would be interesting to see how it is. I'm curious. I mean, and that's kind of the same way that I feel about the Fuji, the XH1. I'm curious to see what it can do, see what they come up with, how it works. But yeah, for all of that stuff, I still think that for most people, and I forgot your username who just asked me this question. Flare the Fire Dragon, looking for the best camera for my vlogs instead of a phone. I would say, number one, what is your budget? Number two, how are you shooting? Do you need autofocus? Are you shooting handheld? Are you shooting things that are are you making videos where you're in front of the camera, where you're talking to it, or where you're behind the camera and you're shooting videos of action of other people and other things? And, where are you typically shooting these things? And, what is your kind of the budget that you have to work with? But without hearing the answer to any of those questions at this point, I would say probably the G7 or the G85. Those are my knee-jerk reaction for video cameras, just because they're optimized really well and they have. Okay, so and Peter says the Canon SL2 is an easy starting point with the dual pixel AF. Yes, I've heard good things about the Canon autofocus. I don't have any experience shooting that, but that makes sense to me as well from what I've heard and seen on other channels. King usually says, I'm saving up for the G80, G85. When I had it, did I get any prints made? Good question. No, I did not print anything off of the G85. But I can tell you, and this may or may not help, but the G85 is very sharp from a digital standpoint. I would say the G85 and the GH5 photos are absolutely comparable. And the GH5 photos that I've printed are outstanding. Outstanding. I, love them. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't think that the megapixel count will be a punishment. It's really good. The stills, and also since they took out the anti-aliasing filter, I believe, it's quite sharp. It's a little bit sharper even than the G7, which the G7, I've gotten prints made with the G7 that are beautiful, very sharp. And so it's, the G85, I guess that was part of my logic, was that, if the G7 makes prints that are that good, the G85 has to be at least that good or better. And I believe that to be the case, because the G7 prints that I have, I've been very, very happy with them. And also the GH5 too. Because from a digital standpoint, when you're looking at it, Christopher Holiday, good evening from Seattle, by the way. I forgot to recognize you when you checked in. That's basically the size of it. Good glass, good light, and get it right the first. You can definitely make prints that are comparable to an APS-C camera. It's just you have to get it. You have less of a margin of error and flexibility in that case, where if you're having to edit it more heavily or crop it more heavily or all that stuff, then you're going to get a little bit punishment. But if it's if you get the light right and all that stuff, I mean, you can, it's really fantastic. Even still, and honestly, the IBIS with the video makes such a big difference. Such a big difference that it's one of the things that I like to recommend to most people who are starting out, just because it's so simple, straightforward to use, and all that. It makes such a big difference in your ability to shoot video having the IBIS in there, and also actually even the IBIS for like longer exposure stills, so that you can keep the ISO on the lower side. You know. So just for the yes, and so I'm sorry, Queen of San Joaquin. I saw that you said that before. You got 180 subscribers. I'm proud to be one of your subscribers, and so if you guys haven't subscribed to Queen of San Joaquin's channel, make sure you go and do that. I have been very bad. I've been a bad YouTube follower of recently. I haven't spent a lot of time on here. I haven't spent a lot of time even on my own channel recently. So, yeah, I'm gonna have to catch up with the stuff that you've been doing. And I'm very happy to see you here, Robert, as well. And Andrew, my live streams. Typically, I do live streams on Fridays. Now that my situation is complicated, but I'm back in school now, which actually means that I'm away from my family, so I have more free time to do more live streams. Probably going to do live streams like Sunday night and Friday night, something like that. Or I might even do I might change that up a little bit. But I do the simplest way, and I know this is a terrible answer, but this is the best I got. If you follow me on Twitter, I'm at Living Vertical, or on Instagram, I'm at Living Vertical. I always put, I put something up there on my story on Instagram, or on my, my Twitter feed, just telling people a half hour before I go on. Typically, I like to start live streams at 8 to 8:30. What complicates things is that on Fridays, since I'm currently in school, on Fridays, I'm going back and forth. I'm usually traveling on Fridays, and then so that means I'm getting in without a lot of time to prepare, and then I got to put my daughter down, and then when I put her down to sleep, that's usually right at around 8 o'clock, so that messes things up, and then I can't make noise and be doing what I'm doing because the space. So anyways, all that to say that Sunday nights are probably going to be when I'm going to start. I'm looking to, Eastern time, though. That is 8 p.m. Eastern time. That's usually what I'm going for. And Fridays and Sundays, and I may fill in a little bit more too. Good deal, Scott. I didn't see that either. I was kind of fixated on what I was talking about there. With I was embarrassed because I couldn't give a more put together answer of when my live streams start, because I got kind of put on the spot there, and came up wanting. But congratulations, that's pretty sweet feeling every time. And now it's like 4,000. Now you're like looking for 5,000. It's cool to see how that goes. And it's like, your first 100 subscribers, it's like that, and then your first 200, and then your first 300, and it doesn't stop. So that's good. Like, stay psyched on that. Robert Moline asks if I could repeat which Minolta lenses I really enjoy. No worries at all. Yeah, happy to talk about Minolta lenses. They are my pride and joy in terms of the vintage glass. I have three favorite. I don't know. It's hard to say. I like so many of the vintage lenses, but I would say that the 28 and the 45 are the ones that I like the best with Minolta. They are really super lenses, super sharp, super cheap, light, and the 28 millimeter is, I think, a 2.8, and the 45 is like f2, if I'm not mistaken. But that 45, even with a dummy adapter, and I think I actually like them better because of the fact if you shoot them without any sort of glass, like any speed booster in there, I like them even better, and they're really fantastic. very, very sharp. Like the 45 especially, I was just blown away how sharp and how much detail that lens can do. It's just amazing. And I got it for like 35 bucks or something like that. So one of the things I try to recommend to people, if they're open to it, it's like somebody's looking to buy a camera and they don't have money for lenses. I'm like, get a wider lens that has autofocus, like a 23 millimeter lens. And then, if you want something for portraits, assuming that you're going to be shooting a cooperative person who's not going to be dancing around on you, get a manual focus lens like the Minolta's, and the 45 especially is just, it's just magnificent, just so nice. Just love that lens. I want to shoot more with that, actually. I need to. I have a lot of stuff that I need to do and that I need to shoot, but then I also have videos that I need to make, so I can't shoot stuff because I got to finish making videos. So that's kind of my predicament here. I'm a victim of my own success, you could say. Cool. Christopher Holiday got the 23 f1.4 by Fuji and loving the manual clutch focus on it. That manual clutch focus, I'm assuming that's the same thing as it's on the 16 millimeter, where you have to like slide it up to engage or disengage the manual focus. Or maybe I'm misunderstanding, because I have not used, although I almost bought that a long time ago, but then I didn't. And Tiff, the adapter that I use for my Minolta lenses, it's a, what is it? It's just a no-name adapter, and that I got off of eBay. Both the speed booster, actually the speed booster I got was a Pixco, which is like, I think might be a second Roxen. If you ever watch any Caleb Pike's videos of the filmmaking stuff, I think not DSLR guide, but DSLR shooter, I think is his channel. And he recommends in all his videos, or a lot of his videos, he recommends Roxen. It's a brand out of, like, I think Taiwan, maybe, or Hong Kong. And but it's off-brand glass, of course, but they make good speed boosters. And I think Pixco is like kind of their, like, an affiliate or a sister company or something, or maybe they rebranded and changed the company name or something like that. But the Pixco is what I've been using for the speed booster, and then for the dummy adapters, I think actually Pixco makes dummy adapters too, and that's what I've been using. I think I got them off of eBay for not very much, like 15 or 20 bucks, something like that. So the speed booster, it is a focal reducer, and it also adds a stop of light. So basically it effectively widens your field of view on your lens by a fraction that basically enables your lens to see a little bit wider, and also allows it to gather a little bit more light as well. So the downside with that is that it also, by introducing more glass, and oftentimes glass that is of lesser quality, or maybe even just less well matched to the glass within the lens, it can create some degradation to the image quality as a result, even though you're gaining a little bit of width and speed. And what I've noticed is, like, on the Minolta lenses, which when I shot through a dummy adapter without that glass in between, obviously you lose one stop of light, and you have the more of a crop factor operating there, but everything is just like tack sharp corner to corner. But then when you put the speed booster on with the still images, depending on how stopped down it is, it's less noticeable when you stop it down more, but it can introduce some distortion around the edges, which is kind of a cool effect sometimes, but it depends. Also, it depends on what you're looking for, because sometimes if you want that effect, the speed booster can actually actually be nice. And probably if you invest more money than like $75 in your speed booster, which is what I did, because I got my speed booster mainly for video, and on video that little bit of distortion, I believe I feel like I've gotten away with it. It's not something that when I look at it I don't see it, but with the stills I see it. Robert, your 45 and 28, those are really fantastic lenses, and your 135, is that a Minolta lens as well? Because that would be pretty sweet. I didn't know the Minolta made a 135, but I mean I guess it stands to figure. My 135 is actually one of my favorite lenses as well, but that's a Fuji. I forget what it's. Oh, okay. Then I would imagine it's got to be pretty sharp, because Minolta's lenses, they're all just like they're very, at least what I've seen of them, I've been very impressed with the glass. But the Fuji is an old Fuji lens, and I got it for $40 at KEH, and it was, I was just looking it up. I looked it up on Flickr, and I saw some good stuff, and people said it was sharp, and I looked at some pictures, and they were sharp, and I was like, $40, done deal. And so I've been using that. And that actually, the next video that that's gonna publish on Tuesday, has some shots from that lens in there too. So it's pretty superb. So yeah, Robert, I think that one of the biggest values with the mirrorless cameras, I honestly think, is the fact that you can adapt vintage lenses and use them on there. It's just like a huge thing. I didn't even realize it, like that, how easy it was. And also the other thing too is that how much money you can save, and how easy it is to effectively manual focus when you're when you're shooting a camera that has really good manual focus assist and focus peaking and all of those kind of like little bells and whistles, which I don't feel like I ever had on any of my Nikon cameras. I would have been flying blind on those, but with the mirrorless cameras, they're really well adapted to using vintage glass and giving you a really good experience, to the point where I don't feel like it's really much of a disadvantage to be shooting manual focus on like the advantages of manual focus vintage lenses, I think, outweigh the disadvantages of not having autofocus in many cases, with the ease that the mirrorless cameras can operate. And especially, I got to be honest, like the XE3, the touchscreen, and maybe even on the Olympus too. I got to test that out. I don't know if the touchscreen is the same functionality on that, but like swipe gestures on the Fuji XE3, swipe gestures to punch in, get manual focus assist, and the clarity of the focus peaking just make it a joy to work with. It's just very seamless. So I've been really stoked on that. Queen of San Joaquin says, just so you all know, I'm posting videos lately when I work on a car. That will change when I get a better setup. Very cool. Well, I'm glad that you're posting any videos, and that you're still working on this, moving forward with it, because that's goals are super important. And I mentioned a couple times here, my goal for the new year, really, mainly my goal, generally speaking, is to pay down debt this year and get my financial life in order and really get my act together, because I'm tired of being broke and in debt. That's one of the downsides of being able to review all these nice fancy cameras, is that like you do that at a cost, or a lot of people do, and I being one of them. And it's really easy to get into debt with this stuff, because aside from the fact that we love it, there's also the fact that it's like, in your mind, there's this idea that, well, maybe I'll make something back off of it if I shoot a little bit and make some money off the shooting. And, I just want to get myself situated. So, yeah, I hope I can get to it. I hope I can stick to it as well, Queen. And, Peter, I think that, I think I found my 5-year kit, honestly. Like, the XE3 and the GH5, I can't see any reason why I would want or need any more camera unless one of them breaks. And honestly, if one of them breaks, excuse me, I'm tired. I'm gonna have to wrap this up here in just a bit. But like, I love the Fuji cameras, but if push came to shove and the XC3 broke, I could soldier on with just the GH5 and I could still do okay. I could still do okay. Um, so yeah, at the end of the day, I think I got myself the 5-year kit here, and then some. I got more than what I need. It's just, you know, I'm sure they're gonna make like the XE4 and they're gonna weather seal that and put dual cards in it, and I'm gonna be like, no, you know, and I'm gonna want to get that, but we'll see. Anyways, gang, I have enjoyed this live stream with you guys tonight. We are 29 minutes deep here. And I have not slept much for the past couple nights, which you may or may not be able to tell, which is why it takes me so long to say the OMD EM10 Mark II every time, which actually that time I said it perfectly without stumbling, although I might have gotten it wrong. But oh yeah, well this is come on, this isn't a long one. This is just like, you know, I'm getting warmed up. When my family isn't around, you know, and it's just me and I got nothing better to do, like I'll go on for like 3 hours. You know how we do here on the Living Vertical live streams. But Andrew is asking about the XE1 versus the XE3. Andrew, I don't know anything about the XE1 or the XE2. I've seen really nice pictures made with both of them. I feel like, especially if you already have lenses within the Fuji ecosystem, and so many of the new, whether it's the X100F, the XT2, XT20, X Pro 2, like all of them, the image quality is and the performance is so high across all of them that you're really splitting hairs, which I think is a good thing, but it can make comparisons infuriating because it's like, wait a minute, what's different here? There's so much to look at and there's so much overlap that you almost are like, wait a minute. But value for money in terms of performance for the dollar, I feel like the XE3 is absolutely outstanding. I can't compare it to the XE1, but I know that the XE3 is a really, really good camera. Really nice, handles very well. The swipe gestures on the, you know, the touch technology, really, really good. The minimalistic layout, and you know, of course, I have a handful of videos on this channel about and a playlist as well about the XE3 that you can look at, and I have a couple more videos that I'm going to be putting out about the XE3 before all is said and done. But it's light but not flimsy. It's well thought out. It's very minimalistic, and the touch technology takes a little while to warm up to, a little while to embrace. But once you're okay with it, use it for a day or two and just force yourself to use it. You know, it's pretty sweet. You know, the X trans sensors, the 24 versus the 16, like, I don't think that makes a hill of beans worth the difference. You know, again, it depends on the size that you're printing, but I have, you know, again, having not shot with that specific camera, I have shot and printed from the XT10 and the X100T. And the X100T, like, you know, 20 by 30 inch prints that are outstanding, that are really good. So, to me, I don't know how much you're actually going to gain other than you get the, you do get some ability to crop, certainly, which is valuable. And it's also harder to say like what they have upgraded in terms of their color technology or in any sort of their processing, not just in the sensor, but then in like the processing circuitry that, you know, goes into all of that stuff. And I think I remember hearing that they have changed some of that. But and yeah, to agree with what Peter's saying there, the autofocus on the newer sensor is definitely like, that was one of the things that honestly blew me away on the XE3 from the get-go, was just how fast the autofocus is. Like, the autofocus is fast, it's sharp, it's solid, it's like bang on, and it's good. It's not like, you know, hunting or uncertain. It's quick in acquisition, and even for continuous autofocus, it does a really good job of like following, you know, a moving target. And again, there's, you know, the algorithm there and the autofocus system within this, the newer sensor. You can adapt, and you can fine-tune the autofocus to match the type of movement that it's meant to be tracking, and I think that's a really handy thing too, even though I don't shoot that much movement, so I haven't spent a lot of time messing around with that. But they've also improved it a lot too. The only real thing that I would say that is, you know, not great about the XE3, which I think is more annoying just by comparison to everything else that is so good, is the fact that the EVF is not very recessed. And I believe the term, I just learned this term today, it's called eye relief, which of course makes me think of Borat and hand relief. Every time the fellow who's telling me about that is typing in the comments, all I could think, I hear Borat inside my head. It's not necessarily the guy that you want in your head, honestly. But basically the idea is that at a certain distance away, that, like, you have, in other words, you have to be really close for your eye to be able to see through it. It's not necessarily, and apparently the X Pro 2 had the same issue, according to David Hobby. So that the EVF can be a little bit challenging if you wear glasses. It's not a deal breaker, but it is the one thing that I think is a little bit not great. But also, you know, the fact that this thing can do 15, I'm sorry, not 15, well, yeah, 15-minute in-camera exposure, which is, you know, without any kind of intervalometer or anything like that, is really, really neat. Really, I love the handling on it. I love the size. The autofocus is really, really fast, and you know, of course, all the stuff that you already know that is good about Fuji cameras. It's better. It's as good and even a little better in some cases when it comes to the image quality. So hard to find too much to not like about it. That's my next video, Peter. That's going to be on Tuesday. It's the and actually, it's night shooting. I didn't really shoot the sky out here because it's all light pollution and awful. So I actually went and shot a waterfall at night. So I don't know. It's you can let me know if you're incredibly disappointed, and maybe I'll make another one where I just specifically go out and shoot the sky. And maybe I will. Maybe that merits its own video. You can let me know. Cool. Anybody have any additional questions? Because I am about ready to start winding it down, and you can probably tell I'm fading a little bit here, which is the reason why I've been like stumbling over everything, because I'm like kind of half asleep now as it is. So I think I'm gonna make an executive decision, and if anybody else has additional questions, comments, anything like that, you go ahead and leave comments down below. Happy to yeah, slurred speech, that's always, yeah, okay, so I do sound, it's not just in my head that I sound tired, it's actually in reality, yeah. Okay. Yeah, and just, Robert, in terms of the iCup, I think it's possible to get like an off-brand one. I've had some people mention those to me, but like, I don't know that that's going to even solve the problem without making it worse. And it feels like I don't actually think that is. So it's not like there's like an iCup, like a separate eyepiece, like on the, you know. So like, for example, there's like a whole individual piece here on this, like on the Olympus EM10 Mark II. It's got like a whole, you know, eye cup on the EVF for the XE3, it's not really like a whole separate piece that's attached on. It's more like all built in to the whole thing, and it's like it seems like it would be very difficult without adding something on top of, because it's like built into the body of the camera itself. So I don't know if that answers your question, but looking at it, my initial thought has not been that it would be a good idea to try to do that, or that it would measurably improve things, because I think the definition of eye relief is like not in the Borat sense of the term, of course, but in like that your eye kind of like bas relief, like the relief or the distance away, that kind of separation from the EVF. If you go beyond a certain distance away from it, that it's no longer visible. Whereas like take the XT2 for example, or like even the GH5, I can hold the GH5 out in front of me, like, you know, 8 inches away from my face, and I can still look through the viewfinder in the middle of the day, because the way that, you know, the way that it resolves everything is a little bit different. But all right, anyways guys, I enjoyed chatting with you guys. I enjoyed the live stream as well. I will be back. I will be doing more. If you haven't subscribed to this channel already, please do so. I would love to have you along. Follow me on Twitter and on Instagram. I'm at Living Vertical on both channels, and that way makes it a little easier for me to notify you about impromptu live streams, because sometimes like during the middle of the week I'll have a little time and I'll jump on and do a live stream. And getting back into the school swing of things now, so I'm going to have to kind of make my schedule for this semester and see where the time fits in and what I can do. But one way or the other, I look forward to bringing you guys more videos. I got 2 dropping this week, Tuesday and Thursday, so make sure you stay tuned for that. If you want to see my work, you can visit livingvertical.org and check out some of my other stuff and sign up for my mailing list. But honestly, like, I don't really blog anymore, so, you know. Anyways, yeah, you guys have a good evening, and I will see you at some point next week. And all right, it's been good. Thanks, guys. Have a good beginning to your week, and we will see if I can find the button here, because yeah. Hey, good night, AJ. Good to see you, and goodbye. Maybe we'll catch you for a little longer now.